Our next speaker is Jason. He has quite an interesting story to share with you all. I'm sure that I can actually bet that half of you guys are here for the next big thing. And Jason, not that long ago, actually 6 months ago, had that big thing, and it's still obviously ongoing. So Jason gonna share his story, how he flew from Silicon Valley to Ukraine, which is something, you know, that not a regular guy does. I mean, he had launched this amazing startup, and he's gonna share his story how from Ukraine he sold his startup to Google. So give a round of applause to James.
So I think they're just getting set up here, but Greg, thank you for scaring the shit out of all of us. If there's one message, do not go to the US to do your startup, because you will be imprisoned and go to jail very, very quickly. I don't know, doom and gloom. You know, we had a startup that was primarily doing face recognition. I'm sure we violate all kinds of privacy laws, left, right, here, there, everywhere, but we were able to be successful. A few words, so I'm impressed by kind of what I've seen. I've never been to Lithuania before. It appears that there are more investors than entrepreneurs, which is a good thing for the entrepreneur. You should always remember that the investor needs you more than you need them at the end of the day. So they need smart companies, smart entrepreneurs to invest in, and hopefully there's a competitive dynamic where you can get some good deal terms. As I mentioned, I am an American who went to Kiev to launch a company and was successful. We actually sold to Google in October. A few disclaimers before we get into this. I'm not a designer, so these slides are going to be completely ugly. I'm also not a professional conference speaker. I think this is probably the largest audience that I've ever spoken to. And this is a story of how we did it. Ukraine is a very, very different place than Lithuania. So some of this will be applicable, some of it won't. I think the takeaway is that I have is just do what you want, how you want to do it, and get it done. Ukraine is a place that will put a lot in front of you, a lot of hurdles, a lot of frictional costs. But if you just kind of put your head down and head forward, you can achieve great things there, and it should not hold you back. I've had 3 startups, so 3 starts and 1 finish. The CEO of Udall sold to Google Rolla. And I currently have investments kind of spread all over the place. And our main investing vehicle is called Blueprint Fund, which is actually a venture capital fund based in Kiev to make investments into Ukraine. First the war story, then the takeaways. So we were the largest US venture-backed exit ever in the Ukraine. And I think what's special about this is it started as a pitch at a local university as a master's thesis. So it was literally something that was on a whiteboard, kind of key innovation that was happening at a university that we went in and licensed out. But it took a Ukrainian American to understand the dynamics of the market and the risks in order to get it going and give us the angel money. This is the first and biggest dilemma when you look at doing something in a market like the Ukraine and you have kind of a target market that's outside of it. In Ukraine, you can kind of do a gray market company where you make a lot of cash, you pay your employees in cash, but this ends up completely fucking you over when you want to get institutional capital. They're not going to invest in a structure that has these kind of gray market operations. So kind of no matter how successful you are, if you're not running your company properly, these big VCs are going to look at you and pass. And there's a lot of, the companies now in Ukraine get trapped. They might make $5–10 million a month, and they're looking for capital to scale, and somebody does diligence and like, well, how are you making this money? How are you paying your employees? And like, well, it's all cash. Well, all cash is not a way that institutional investors can work. So our structure was that we had a US-based company with a rep office in Kiev, and we did this, the US company, because it was the most efficient vehicle to take investment funds. So Silicon Valley VCs were comfortable with investing in, what started as a US LLC, as opposed to going and pitching a Ukrainian company. And there was an advantage to this was that all of the IP we secured to the US company, such that when we thought a potential acquirer would come in, they would know the rules, they would know exactly how it was set up. This was actually a very fun challenge. Was working with a Ukrainian state-run, state-funded university. We went in there and said, look, we're very interested in this technology, we want to license it. And they're like, you want to do what? There's kind of no model for this. There was no forms for this, and so it ended up being a lot of paperwork. But I can tell you that when we were in the acquisition process and we had a couple companies bidding for us, this paperwork ended up being the most important thing that we did. And they went and diligences, they read it, they hired local counsel. So things that you think you should move fast through, it's actually worthwhile to spend, and you have to spend the time, make sure your I's are dotted and your T's are crossed. This was a question that we got earlier, even IP laws in the Ukraine. There are, but they're not the same. And you have to make sure that whatever local market that you're working in, you secure your IP in the same way that you would secure it in the US, such that a US buyer understands it. Compensation. So kind of like the Ukraine is very, very outsource driven, which means that you can quit one day and get a job the next day at some other company. So you need to pay at competitive levels or your employees won't stay. And I put a big asterisk there because we actually did have a core group of employees that believed in the mission and kind of would stay no matter what. We gave every employee options, from the secretary to interns to anybody who ever worked with us. We always gave them options because we wanted everybody to have a sense of feeling of ownership in the business. And this was kind of trying to create this atmosphere of, look, we're not here because we're saving money, we're here because we're doing core research and core innovation. So raising VC in the Valley, which I guess is the dream for a lot of you guys. We were actually asked this, where in Russia is Kiev? So it's kind of a geography that's not familiar to most people. It scares them. And this was a funny one. Kiev is too far away for us to invest in. And this was actually from a British VC, which I think it's like a 3.5-hour flight, so it actually is not that far. But there was this crazy guy in Los Angeles who said, let's get on a plane and let's do it. So I think we saw some kind of cultural differences between European VC, which tends to be a little bit less risk averse, and then the Los Angeles guy was like, let's just get on a plane and let's go see it. And if we like it, we're willing to dive headfirst into the geography. At the end of the day, we ended up raising from about 6 or 7 different capital sources, and each one had to come and see it, see the operation, because we were based in Kiev. So they literally had to get on a plane and come out. And again, I keep hitting on this, get your structure right, spend time with the lawyers, and the investors will spend a ton of time diligencing whatever structure that you have. But at the end of the day, there's still this geography risk, and the investors had to be willing to go into the Ukraine, which is a very specific geography, and deal with that. So we started off with the traditional kind of angel. I think we did like around $1 million in angel. Anthem Venture Partners came in and did our Series A. And then we had a kind of unique group of investors that came in for the Series B. WTI was actually debt money that we took, so we were able to get some venture debt. Best Buy is kind of a large electronics retailer. You guys know Qualcomm builds a lot of chips, so we had Qualcomm and AMD, which are 2 semiconductors. And then Relay Ventures is kind of a mobile-focused fund. So I think all in, we raised over $15 million. And what's unique is, the day that we sold the company, I was the only U.S. employee. So this was not, I joke that I was kind of the outsourced CEO. But this money was primarily spent in Kiev to build the team there. It was really shitty at times. I think in kind of what I heard on stage for the first one was like, let's raise money, let's get the VC, let's do this. VC was probably one of the most painful experiences of my entire life. There's lots of strings attached to it. And raising VC is not the goal, it's only a means to the goal. If you can not raise VC and have your business, you should definitely do that. We went from 4 employees all the way up to 80 down to 30. There were times, I can't even count the number of times that we were bankrupt in between rounds trying to make payroll. We switched technology platforms. We started on the server and ended up on a phone. We turned over staff, and it was hard to get revenue. So this was not the dream by any chance. You think, oh, you go raise all this money, you get the Silicon Valley VCs, everything's going to be great. And it was a very, very long, hard path. And at the end of the day, the worst part of it was we had to watch all of our competitors get bought. So we saw 3 acquisitions that happened before us. And so you're sitting around saying, why are we the ones not getting bought? Are we fucked? Are we, we're just the worst, or what? It's kind of all these things are going through your head as the entrepreneur, and we didn't know what to make of it. And then you hear this from some banker, companies aren't sold, they're bought. Yeah, and I think this is kind of a complete fantasy. We worked very hard to sell Vutal. Towards the end, we were very actively marketing the company. We were doing things that we thought would make ourselves attractive. It just didn't, you don't just raise VC, build a company, and somebody comes out of the blue and buys you. The acquisition process, being the last man standing, so we were being the only ones left to buy, was actually a good thing. And we had two very, very large companies that were bidding for us at the end of the day. So we went through what amounted to be like a 6-month process of getting offer from one company, getting it countered from another company, waiting out the silence period and this and that. But I think that at the end of the day, it turned out well. We had a lot of price action that moved the valuation upwards. What saved us at the end of the day was the team. And I think this is what was so special about Vutal. It's, everybody was like, well, why don't you hire engineers in Silicon Valley? The guys that we were getting in Kiev, I couldn't find in Silicon Valley. And apparently neither could Google. And so, we really focused on the team. This was not outsourcing. This was not, oh, you're in Kiev, so you should expect less. This is, no, we're in Kiev building a world-class organization, working with, world-class partners and world-class investors. But I think, one of the facts of life here is that there was a discount placed on the company, the overall valuation, because of the geography. And it really cut down on the number of potential acquirers that would enter the Ukraine. So, we went through diligence with some of the bigger names out there, and they're like, look, we're just not going to buy a company that's in Kiev. And that was kind of the end of the story. So we had to find somebody that was big enough and had the resources enough and the willingness to understand what it would take to buy a company out of a geography that they weren't familiar with, and also that kind of had different legal structures. The payoff was kind of a very successful acquisition. There's literally 23-year-old kids that were working for me that are making hundreds of thousands of dollars working at Google now. The options that everybody would have sold me for $5 before, they actually paid off, and everybody made money, from the interns to the secretary. The university that we licensed the core technology from made a lot of money, and then hopefully this is a proof point that this can happen in Kiev, and I guess in the region in general. Kind of a main message, like, look, you actually don't have to leave. You can build a company here, and you can be successful if you do it in the right way. So here's some lessons learned quickly, and then we'll go to some questions. You better have a plan for when you don't hit the startup lottery. As an entrepreneur, you kind of have one shot. And so when you're not, Facebook or Airbnb or any of these popular guys that, go out and immediately raise a lot of money or get a lot of traction, you need to have a plan for that, because it's going to end up being a lot of work. Things are not going to go well. But I think that there's this attitude that you look at these proof points in the market and you think that you're going to be that proof point, but really those are kind of 1 out of 1,000 bets that end up paying off. And like I said, if you're the entrepreneur, I never want to be a lottery ticket. Whatever I do, I want to be successful. So don't count on winning the lottery. When you're forming your business, do it correctly. It's something that is tedious. You want to get going. You want to start building. You want to start coding as fast as possible. But you need to set up structures that are fundable, and then at the end of the day can transact. And another point too, I think you also need to decide if VC is the best kind of capital to get. Not all businesses are actually VC models. So I think there's tons of sources of capital here. But if you're a small business, maybe you just are a small business. If you take VC, it's very hard to get money out. You can't cash out every month if you have a good month on this, but you have to wait for some kind of liquidity event. You're kind of put on this timetable of 5 to 7 years where they need to exit the fund. I know VC is kind of the sexy term, let's go raise, but sometimes you're better off with business angels that will go into a different kind of capital structure and a different type of structure where you can actually get money out if you don't end up being $1 billion business, but you end up making a decent amount a month, to not get trapped in the VC model. Right-sizing investments. We raised way too much money, and part of this was the R&D cycle took longer than we thought. But at the end of the day, kind of the acquisition market was a certain size for companies that were our size, And we just had too much capital in, which made it a little bit difficult to exit and get the VC style returns. This is play by the rules. If you owe tax, then pay it. This is more of a Ukraine issue. There's kind of an attitude of dodging the taxes and not paying anything. But like I said, this doesn't scale. If you operate a business like this, you're never going to get international entities or foreign investors to come into your model and actually put money in. The employees, like I said, we kind of overspent on employees and on perks, and we were not running it like outsourcing. The entire team was in Kiev. The entire value of the company was in Kiev. If those guys left, we would have had nothing. And give them a unique opportunity. I think, from my side, going and meeting at, all the Silicon Valley companies was kind of like the day job. But for these guys, we'd actually fly them out and have them go into the meetings with us, lead parts of the meetings. And so we gave them this opportunity that's like, look, you're not just a developer, you're not just a smart engineer. You can actually come and see Silicon Valley. You can see how these big companies work. This is a big one for me because I am a foreigner in the geography. In the Ukraine, there's this attitude that the world is always ending. That that every time there's an election, the country is going to crumble and fall, and you're going to go to jail, and the laws are a moving target. Nobody knows how the taxes are working. For me and for the companies that I work with now, it's like, look, just keep your head down, ignore all the bullshit, stay focused, build a product. If a problem arises, we deal with it then. But don't kind of don't get disparaged. Don't fill your head with all this stuff even before you get going. So that's kind of the control what you can, ignore the rest. So here's my personal bias: is getting an American CEO is not a bad thing. I know there's a feeling that if you're a Lithuanian startup, a Ukrainian startup, that the CEO needs to scale with the business kind of from the founder all the way up. A lot of the times that doesn't work, and I think in the case of Vutal, I mean, again, I'm personally biased, but having kind of a Silicon Valley presence and being able to navigate those waters was tremendously valuable for the company, and it should not be viewed as a negative mark on the founder or the current CEO that's there. It's not to say that some people don't scale; it's that all people won't scale. I actually think that you can raise abroad but build at home, and I think this is a perfect example. This seems to be a pretty vibrant community. I don't see any reason to leave it other than to go do sales and business development. It would seem like a mistake to move all of your engineers to one of the worst places in the world to hire when you have such kind of a great talent pool here. This is your country. You have people, the community. You go to Silicon Valley, you're going to be the fish out of water. You're not going to know anybody. They're going to speak a different language. You're not going to, it doesn't make any sense. And for us, I speak negatively about VCs, but they actually did add a lot of value to us. And then what was interesting too is that the strategics actually played out. So AMD and Qualcomm added a ton of value, helped us on our technology roadmap. But the one thing to be careful there is not to get any ROFRs. So kind of no special terms just because they're strategic. And like I mentioned, the last 2 points, you can't hire in California and New York unless you're one of these kind of massive startups that's won the lottery. And so this is it. So Silicon Valley actually kind of sucks. You shouldn't consider this the goal in the end. If you get into Y Combinator, fantastic. If you can raise from Excel and Andreessen and get these crazy terms, then go live the dream. You've won the lottery, fantastic. I wish I had invested earlier. But for most of you, it's not going to be a good experience. And I think it's going to be tough. And it's not kind of everything that you would imagine. And I'm this, I was in Silicon Valley. I was running, the Vutal office in Silicon Valley, and we kind of did the dream, right? We raised a bunch of venture capital and we sold to Google. And now my home base is Kiev, and I see more opportunity in this region than I do in California. So that's it. Now I invest, Mitura Public Ventures, and then Blueprint, which is based out of Kiev. So actually, there's some time for some questions if somebody wants to take a mic and shoot a question up. No? Uh-oh.
No, just explain what ROFRs are.
ROFRs are called right of first refusals, and they basically make you dead in an M&A market. So if you sign a deal with a strategic or with any source of capital, where that person has the right of first refusal, which means that they have the first option to buy your company. It's going to be very hard to get any other companies to bid on your company because they know that there's that one guy that can just take the deal away from them. So an M&A team is not going to want to engage in diligence on a deal just to have it taken away from them at the last minute. Anything else?
Hi, I saw your note on one of the slides that small startup markets are very gossipy and was advised control your story. Could you elaborate a little bit more what you mean?
Yeah, so this is, Kiev is actually, it's much larger. I think there's more people in Kiev than there is kind of in this entire country. But gossipy means there's kind of lots of talk, that's happening. And you have to be very careful to control your message on the ground. And we had this because we turned over people. And we turned over early employees at the company, and they would go and say negative things about, kind of Udall and what we were doing. And we kind of didn't engage in that. I think this is probably a pretty similar market where everybody knows each other. And if your deal is dead to one person, or one person feels like they got burned on something, they're going to say negative things, and you got to ignore it. And I think you kind of just keep going along your way. But be aware that if you're in a small market, it is quite gossipy.
Okay, thanks a lot, Jason. Is there more questions? Yeah, there is some. Who's in that corner?
Hi, thanks for the story. I'm curious what the service you sold and what cash did you get from Google, if you can say that?
So we sold anything anybody would buy.
Yeah, but what the service
we
you
had a bunch
created?
of computer vision engineers. And so, our core competency was working with anything that was computer vision. We, first started off doing face detection, face recognition. Then we added feature point detection, feature point recognition. Then we looked at generic objects. Then we looked at 3D. Like I said, we did not, the original pitch was find faces in video, and we developed an efficient system for that. We figured out early on that we really couldn't sell that or sell it at scale. And so we changed. And we changed a lot. But what remained the same, we had kind of 8 core guys that were the research team. And that's where the value of the company was. But
So
I kind of give the smart ass answer of build anything anybody could sell, but we actually did kind of follow the money.
So you did sell the team, not the idea, right?
No, it was look, they had we happened to get lucky, and there was 2 companies that were looking for face recognition. And so we sold the tech and the team. But I think, my point is that if you look at kind of our funding path, we started off server side, and then, Best Buy and AMD invested because they thought there was a play to be had on the desktop. And then we found out that we could raise money in mobile, so we went and raised from mobile funds like Qualcomm and Relay. And so, it didn't happen overnight for us. We didn't just build something in 6 months and the thing took off and was a massive success. We actually built a lot of stuff that didn't work. And like I said, between the rounds, because it wasn't working, we had negative data points. The VCs would look at it and say, we don't want to be in this business. And we had to shift many, many times. We had to shift employees many, many times. We had to change technology many, many times. So this was really, this was not the startup lottery. This was, we worked this deal, and we worked it a long time.
And so in the end, the cash out side of it was...
I can't say, but there's articles that you can Google that make speculations as to the amount.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks a lot.
Any more questions?
Hi, how did you recruit the first core people to start the team?
So they actually came out of the university lab. The first guy who wrote his master's thesis was obviously one of the core, and then we were just able to recruit out of that lab. So we took people who were primarily researchers and kept them together, and then built what we thought was going to be a business around them. But we kept very good relationship with the lab. Like I said, we actually licensed it out of the lab, so they had a financial incentive to kind of help us out and make sure that the company was successful. And that relationship, lasted over the 5 years. Most of our good employees came out of that lab and came because of the cooperation with the university. All right.